Well, Simon, one thing that we do get a lot of course, is inquiries, questions, just regarding the whole process. If you want to renovate, what kind of permits are required, what changes to the building code. There's a lot of confusion.
Yeah, new home construction, and what's normal and what's allowed and what should I look for, and
we can't even keep up with it. I mean, there's
changes all the time.
There's so much. So we're very lucky because we have Vince Molinaro, and he is the newly elected president of the Ontario Home Builders Association, and he's also the president of Molinaro Group, which means, of course, he's got a little bit of history in the industry.
Kind of knows some stuff.
I'd say so.
Yeah.
So welcome, Vince, to the program. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Aaron and Simon, for having me.
Now, let's talk a little bit first about your company in terms of, how is it that you became the newly elected president? You've been in this industry for a while. It's a family-owned business, so tell us more.
Thanks, Aaron and Simon. Yeah, my dad started the business 50 years ago. He came over from Italy with basically a cardboard suitcase and a passion. So he did have some skill sets. So he came here and started this business called Molinaro Group. Right now, we specialize in high-rise condominiums. We build in the downtown Burlington area predominantly, but we've built all over Ontario.
Fantastic. So great family history. And then, of course, you become newly elected president of the Ontario Home Builders Association. So I know that when you were speaking before we came on air, that's a huge privilege and you're really thrilled to have that opportunity. So explain why.
It's a way of giving back to the industry. I've actually been president before, but it was the local chapter. So we have... And part of the OHBA is 31 locals, Hamilton being one of them. I was the Hamilton president in 2007. Got to like it. I was heavily involved in that role back in the day and led my way up to the executive board of the Ontario Home Builders Association, eventually to president.
Okay, which looks after all the chapters.
Exactly.
So you're in the know when it comes to understanding what's happening, what's new in the home, builders, the rulings and what's allowed. You pretty much have the take on that.
Exactly.
Okay. And they do change. I mean, this is something that you just don't all of a sudden decide, we're going to allow 6-story wood construction. I mean, there's a whole process that's involved before something becomes what we call code.
Absolutely. 2 years ago, then President Leith Moore started the charge here to get 6-story wood introduced into the Ontario Building Code. It's been in other jurisdictions. It's in the National Code. They've been doing it in BC for a few years, in Quebec. 2 years doesn't sound like a lot of time. Actually, in the legislative time frame of things, it's actually pretty short. So we're quite proud that we got 6-story wood introduced into Ontario.
And explain, Vince, why that's so important.
A number of reasons why. It goes to our pillars of choice and affordability. So not all municipalities can have high-rise buildings like we can see out your window here. You know what? There's a lot of municipalities that need to intensify, can't go high. 6-story would be the perfect mid-rise solution. It's got a very pedestrian feel. On the affordability side of things, we're finding out now. We just did a tour in Vancouver, BC, and it's 15 to 20% cheaper. So it offers another affordable option to our purchasers, which is important.
So Simon, touch upon that. As a broker, how important is that, this building option now where there's wood construction going 6 stories?
Well, as a consumer, first of all, my first question is it safe? Because, I mean, the misconception is that wood is less safe than other construction styles. But, we don't have any issues with fire in Canada in general, as opposed to, you watch the news, Buffalo, Cheektowaga, there's all kinds of fires there. But building code is really evolved, and wood construction is very safe. And, with the pricing being pricing doing what it's done in the municipalities all across the country, price and price points are really important. So if it can bring the affordability down, we're talking about 15-20%. That's a lot of money.
Yeah,
that's very substantial. So we can bring the cost down and do low-rise construction. I think it's going to be a win-win.
It's a win-win,
not just for first-time buyers, but also for investors and the industry, of course.
Okay. Well, maybe you can, Vince, talk to the point of what the Ontario Home Builders Association, what the purpose is.
So we are the voice for the new home buyer. You won't likely see person buying a home being a delegate, approaching a local council at a municipal level, or approaching an MPP on legislative issues. We are the front voice for these people. We're out there looking after them to making sure they have, first of all, choice and affordability, our two key platforms.
All right. Now, a lot of people, Simon, of course, I have to play devil's advocate here. They'd say, okay, yeah, great. So it's probably a bunch of builder reps that basically are, organizing this board and really doing things that are for their own personal gain and purpose. So what do you say to that?
Well, our best interests are the consumer's best interests, right? So if we can make the case, if we can keeping government at task and making sure that things are affordable and there's choices out there for them, I don't see any conflict there whatsoever.
And people forget about that, Simon. We talk to this a great deal. They forget the fact that without builders, you'd have nothing to buy. And more importantly, if builders weren't conscientious in terms of understanding that they had a variety of product to handle and to be able to accommodate all price points and of all different purchasers or types of buyers, then we'd be in a real situation, right? We'd have a problem on our hands.
Listen, it's the industry has to police itself because happy customer is a healthy business, and this is what the strongest builders know. If you can improve things for your client experience, which is the buyer, then you're going to sell more homes, and your business is going to thrive as it has for companies like the Molinaro Group, been around for decades and decades. They still wouldn't be around if there weren't happy clients. And here's the other thing too. The industry knows construction and knows what could be improved upon far more quickly and before the consumers do, because all from a first-time buyer's perspective, what does the house look like, and how's the kitchen? Does it have granite countertops?
Their focus is
and
so
how are the
different.
floors?
Yeah.
It's so superficial, and all the other stuff, energy efficiency and costs and timelines. I mean, that really is a big part of it, isn't it?
Absolutely, Simon. And that's a good point, because the reality is people are in a market for a new home 4 months, 6 months. They're not really caring about legislative changes, what local municipalities are doing. We're doing the heavy lifting for them. We're trying to make the home buying experience enjoyable for them, making sure they're picking the right colors, the right flooring, appliances and whatnot, and giving them the end product. So we do the heavy lifting for them.
But also the heavy lifting is you're not worrying about yesterday or today. You're actually focusing and worrying about the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So you are so integral in what we call the policy changes, because rightfully you're wanting to have these things in place, these codes in place to help you do your job more efficiently and to do it more effectively and to do it better, which of course who benefits from that? All of us, the purchasers, right?
Absolutely.
So it is a win-win. And of course we have to have some kind of policies in place. So we talked about the 6-story wood construction and the benefits to that. Can you give us some other ideas and aspects of the recent changes to the building code?
Another one that's coming up is the whole accessibility side of things. So there is changes in the January 2015 code having to do with unit styles. So in the past, 10% of all the units had to be accessible. And with accessibility,
so what does that mean to our listeners?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of criteria. It has to have the proper turning radius in the washroom. It has to have the proper counter heights, corridor widths, things like that. So now 15% of every unit style or unit type has to be accessible.
So it went from 10% to 15%.
15%
Okay.
of all types
Of
instead
all
of 10% of the whole building, right?
Oh, okay.
So if you have 20 different unit styles, 15% of those have to be accessible.
And we're talking wheelchair accessible.
For sure.
Yes.
So Simon, touch upon the fact then as a broker, when you're guiding and advising your investors that are buying these investment properties, how does that impact them?
Well, they have to be aware of it. I mean, if you're going to be in the business, you have to be aware of what the legislation is, and if you're looking at income properties, do they conform, or am I looking at an impending major expense down the road to conform to code?
Right.
And a lot of these changes though are grandfathering in older construction,
Okay.
and there's timelines. So it's not like all of a sudden the code changes and I've got to revamp every.
So somebody that right now has a duplex or their own home and that they're renting out the basement apartment legally, they don't have to run and go frantic thinking, oh my goodness, now I've got to make these changes.
No. So it'd be permits before January 15th would be fall under the old code.
Okay, so anything that you've applied for prior to January 2015, your grandfather,
Yes.
basically.
Yeah,
okay.
but there's a lot of people out there that are looking at new developments and they're looking at new investment opportunities. And if they have a component for residential housing, they need to know what the new code for accessibility is, among other things.
All right.
Yeah, and the other thing I just wanted to add, the importance of understanding the value of the industry. When you look at the number of jobs and the amount of money that's going back into the economy, even if you've already bought your new home, you don't care, you're not buying a new one anytime soon, or you're in a resale home, you got to understand that the new home construction industry is such a catalyst, such a driving force for our economy. It's one that we should all be happy to support.
Well, Vince, I'm sure you'll be willing that we get a lot of listener questions, and they submit tons that we can't always answer, and especially regarding building code. So hopefully you'll be okay.
We may be relying on
We're
you.
going to be relying on you. We're going to forward these to you. So everybody out there, if you have a question regarding that, I mean, certainly, Vince, you're the person that will be able to not only answer it or find somebody that can best answer, and that's what we're all about here is educating. So we appreciate you taking time out of your very busy schedule. More importantly, I think people don't realize this is something that you do. It's on top of your busy schedule, you volunteer to do this. You volunteer to be a part of this. And I don't think people realize just how much more work that is. But
so it's not just parties.
It's not just
It's
parties.
not just parties
yeah.
or conferences. No, absolutely. There's
You're
a lot of
out
work
there
attached.
in
yes.
legislation. You're meeting with the movers and the shakers, the people that are policymakers, the politicians. I mean, you're there truly doing your part, which I think, again, it's commendable, fantastic, and good on you.
Thank you, Aaron.
Great to have you. I'll have you back.
Thanks, Simon.